The humans did not send an aid convoy. They sent an invasion fleet. That was the first thing Envoy Veshin Cole understood when the stars vanished behind 300 United Earth warships. His people had asked for shelter. They had sent 5 desperate sentences into the void after 8 months of running from the Turek Dominion, after Dinara Prime had been turned into glass, after 70 million voices had died in the static. They had expected silence. They had expected paperwork. They had expected another polite refusal written by some distant official who could express sorrow without moving a single ship. Instead, the humans arrived like vengeance wearing medical insignia. Carriers the size of cities dropped out of faster-than-light transit first, their hulls scarred, black and blue and silver, weapons folded cold but visible along their flanks. Destroyers followed in a ring formation tight enough to hide the stars. Construction vessels unfolded mechanical arms like giant iron spiders. Freighters came last, already breaking toward the Dinari refugee ships with docking collars extended, water tanks heated, food pallets labeled in Dinari script, medical crates coded for Dinari biology, and children's blankets sealed in transparent packs. The tactical display on Veshin's flagship screamed until the system overloaded. 42 Dinari ships carrying the last 1.6 million of their species drifted inside a human formation built for war. Counselor Pellin gripped the viewport railing beside him. "We asked for sanctuary," she whispered. Veshin could barely speak. "No," he said, watching the human outer ring rotate its guns toward the darkness behind them. "We asked not to die." Then the command channel opened. A woman appeared on the screen, gray-streaked hair pulled back, dark uniform spotless, eyes calm in the way only dangerous people can afford to be calm. "I am General Adrian Vasquez of United Earth Strategic Command," she said. "Hold position. Do not ration further. Supply ships are docking now. Any vessel that cannot maintain pressure will be evacuated first. Any child requiring medical care will be transferred immediately. Any Turek ship that follows you into this sector will be treated as hostile." Veshin stared at her. "General," he managed, "we asked for shelter." Vasquez's expression did not soften. It sharpened. "Then we will build you a fortress." 9 days earlier, Veshin Cole had recorded the last honest message of his life on an open channel because the Dinari had nothing left worth hiding. He had been a diplomat once, a senior envoy of Dinara Prime, trained in ceremonial language, border protocol, trade balancing, and the delicate architecture of polite survival between stronger powers. He knew how to request without sounding desperate. He knew how to flatter without seeming weak. He knew how to turn the suffering of his people into language a bureaucrat might consider actionable. None of it had saved them. The Turek Dominion had come at dawn. Their fleets did not announce conquest. Their commanders did not claim ancient rights or border grievances. They appeared above Dinara Prime in formation, black crescent ships arranged in a harvest arc, and opened fire before the planetary defense ministries had finished identifying the incoming signatures. Dinara had not been a warrior world. Its orbital stations were scientific, agricultural, educational. Its defense grid existed because every responsible civilization maintained one, but it was old, modest, and built to discourage pirates, not resist an empire that considered entire species inventory. By sunset, Dinara Prime had become a mirror of molten glass. The oceans boiled in rings. The universities burned first because they were large, bright, and easy to target from orbit. The Grand Conservatory of Luthen, where music from 9,000 years of Dinari history had been stored in living crystal, shattered under a kinetic strike so powerful that the crystal fragments remained luminous as they fell through the atmosphere. Children's schools became ash. Libraries became heat signatures. Hospitals transmitted evacuation requests until the transmission towers melted. The Hall of Ancestors, where every Dinari family kept memory stones for the dead, glowed white and then vanished into vapor. Veshin had watched from a cargo hauler. He had been returning from a trade negotiation on the outer moon when the Turek arrived. He saw the first strike hit the capital. He heard the planetary choir network, always broadcasting music during the morning civic hour, turn into emergency codes and then into screams. By the time his pilot forced the hauler into emergency jump, Dinara Prime sky had filled with fire. 42 ships escaped, not because they were strong, because they were away. Trade ships, survey vessels, research platforms, family transports, 1 medical frigate, 2 archive barges, 3 food carriers, a ceremonial diplomatic vessel that had never been designed to house refugees and now carried 20,000 people in corridors meant for state dinners. They ran. The Turek did not pursue immediately. Predators rarely sprint after wounded prey when they know starvation will do half the work. The Dominion marked the Denari as claimed remnants under expansion law and began stripping Denara's orbital resources while the survivors fled beyond named routes into unclaimed space. For 8 months, Veshin begged. The Galactic Concord replied with procedural sympathy and an estimated refugee review period of 11 years. The Velthari Federation said its habitats were ecologically saturated and sent a blessing. The Redhani Combine offered berths on industrial stations in exchange for the Denari ship cores, which would have left the survivors stranded as laborers in toxic refineries. Pelin called it slavery with polite formatting. Veshin could not disagree. Every rejection took something from him. Not hope exactly. Hope had died with the first month of hunger. What each rejection took was shape. The shape of the galaxy as he had believed it to be. Civilized, ordered, rational, bound by treaties, guided by law. He learned that law without risk is decoration. On the 241st day after Denara burned, Pelin came to his quarters and said, "There is one more option." "There are no more options." "The humans." Veshin looked up from the fuel projections he had been pretending to study. Humanity was a footnote. A loud, volatile, recently expanded species with a small territory and a reputation for building both hospitals and artillery. With unsettling enthusiasm, they had only been active in interstellar politics for 2 centuries. The Concord considered them culturally immature. The Turek called them border primates with engines. The Velthari complained that human diplomats asked direct questions at improper moments. The Redhani dismissed them as economically unranked. "They have nothing to offer us," Veshin said. Pelin's voice was flat. "We have nothing left to refuse." So he wrote the message. Not with diplomatic craft. Not with ceremony. Not with flattery. "We are the Denari remnant. Our home world was destroyed by the Turek Dominion. We are 42 ships carrying the last of our kind. We are dying. We ask only for shelter." He sent it towards Sol-controlled space and ordered final rationing protocols prepared. 41 hours later, the humans answered. "Hold position. Help is en route. Estimated arrival 9 days. Do not ration further. Supply ships are leading the convoy." Signed, General Adrian Vasquez, United Earth Strategic Command. Pelin had read the message twice. "What is a rapid response division?" she asked. "I don't know." "What does supply ships are leading the convoy imply?" Veshin swallowed. "That there are ships behind them not carrying supplies." For 9 days, the Denari drifted between death and disbelief. On the 3rd day, the medical ship lost pharmaceutical synthesis. Doctors began treating infections with improvised compounds from cargo fungus and expired trade antiseptics. On the 5th day, Transport 19 lost water recycling, and 600 civilians were redistributed into ships already too crowded for grief. On the 7th day, a child was born on a cargo deck beneath emergency lights. Her mother named her Velsha, the one who waits. On the 9th day, the humans arrived. The fleet did not emerge like rescuers. It emerged like a wall. 300 ships in layered formation, outer ring warships, inner ring construction vessels, core ring supply freighters. Their carriers hung in the void like sleeping mountains. Their destroyers moved with the hungry grace of knives. Their engineering ships were ugly, huge, and covered in fabrication arms. Their freighters were already transmitting docking instructions before the Denari command staff finished counting contacts. The first human supply ship docked with Transport 7 without ceremony. A medic in gray armor stepped aboard carrying neonatal nutrient packs labeled in perfect Denari glyphs. A Denari mother took one, read the label, and began sobbing so hard the medic thought he had poisoned her child. On Archive Barge 2, human technicians brought humidity stabilizers for the living crystal memory stacks. On medical ship Dawnvale, trauma surgeons carried biological templates already calibrated to Denari blood chemistry. On Family Transport 11, a human logistics officer opened a crate of children's toys. Pelin found Veshin after that, holding one of the toys in her hand like it was evidence from a crime. "They studied us before they came," she said. "Our biology, Our children. Our light requirements. Our food. Veshin looked out at the human ships moving through his refugee fleet like blood returning to a dying body. Why? He whispered. He found his answer aboard the human flagship. The Carthage was a carrier by classification, but to Veshin it felt like a mobile nation. It was 10 times larger than the Denari flagship, with hangar bays stacked like canyons, medical wards already receiving patients, command decks filled with calm officers, and engine rooms that vibrated with controlled violence. General Vasquez met him in a war room dominated by a holographic display of a star system labeled KR 7741. 3 habitable moons circled a gas giant. An asteroid belt glittered beyond them. A yellow-white star burned steady at the center. This system is uninhabited, Vasquez said. Your people can live here. Veshin stared at the display. For how long? Colonel Darren Okafor, the human engineering commander, stepped forward. He was a tall man with dark skin, broad shoulders, tired eyes, and the quiet confidence of someone who could build a city during an argument. Permanently, Okafor said. The largest moon has breathable atmosphere, stable climate, and enough freshwater locked in subsurface deposits to support your population. We've designated it Haven 4. Operational use. You can rename it when you're ready. Pelin spoke before Veshin could. You intend to build a camp? Okafor looked almost offended. No, we intend to build a home. The display changed. Subsurface habitat complexes appeared under Haven's amber plains. Agricultural biodomes unfolded around rivers. Medical centers, schools, water systems, cultural halls, energy grids, and transport hubs blossomed across the moon in blue light. Above the atmosphere, 12 orbital defense platforms formed a geometric shell. In the asteroid belt, a shipyard assembled itself in simulation from raw or to finished hull. Phase 1 operational in 90 days, Okafor said. Orbital defense in 60. Water and food stabilization in 30. Shipyard skeleton in 120. Veshin felt something inside him recoil from the size of the offer. We cannot pay for this. Vasquez did not blink. Nobody asked you to. Veshin looked at her then, really looked. He saw no pity, no charity performance, no hunger for gratitude. Only controlled fury directed not at him, but at the fact that he had needed to ask at all. Why, he said. We are strangers. Vasquez's answer was immediate. Because someone asked us for help. He waited for the rest. There was no rest. That was all. 18 hours after Turek scouts appeared at the edge of the sector, the combined human and Denari fleet jumped to KR 7741. Vasquez did not hide the move. She wanted the Turek to know where the Denari had gone. She wanted them to follow. She told Veshin speed was a weapon, but clarity was a trap, and humans liked traps better when predators walked into them voluntarily. They arrived on a Tuesday. Human engineers seemed to consider that funny. By the end of the first hour, the construction fleet had divided into 7 task groups. By the third hour, prefabricated habitat modules were falling toward Haven under shuttle escort. By the 6th hour, the first atmospheric processors had gone live. By the 12th, bulldozers were cutting foundation lines into bedrock, while Marines marked defensive perimeters around the future civilian zones. Veshin toured the surface with Okafor on the second day. It was the first time his feet had touched natural ground in 8 months. He stood on Haven's soil and almost collapsed from the simple cruelty of gravity feeling real. The air was thin but breathable. Amber light washed over the plains. Human machines roared across the construction zones in tireless shifts. Thousands of workers moved with frightening coordination, welding, digging, lifting, sealing, mapping. Cargo shuttles came down in silver streams from orbit. Survey drones painted blue grids across hills where schools and gardens would stand. The habitats were not barracks. That stunned him most. They had windows. Real ones. Curved communal spaces. High ceilings. Light wells designed to mimic Dinara's lost son. Sound chambers where musicians could play without echoes becoming painful. Private rooms for families. Memorial walls. Childcare centers. Gardens not yet planted, but ready. Veshin stood inside the circular central commons and looked up at a dome that opened to Haven's sky. Why spend resources on beauty, he asked. Walls and roofs would keep us alive. Okafor turned to him with an expression that was not anger, but close. Alive is the minimum, he said. We are not building the minimum. Nearby, A human engineer named Marco Bellini was welding the steel frame of a school while orbital defense crews installed missile racks in the hills beyond it. Veshin watched him work while news spread that the Turek fleet had answered Vasquez's warning. 16 capital ships, 40 escort frigates, 200 fighter bombers. 72 hours out. Marco lifted his welding visor when Veshin approached. You know they are coming? Veshin asked. Yes. You are building a school. Marco glanced at the frame, then back at Veshin. There are 600 Denari kids who need one. But if the Turek destroy this place tomorrow, then I'd rather they destroy a school we believed in than an empty patch of dirt we were too scared to improve. Veshin had no answer. Marco lowered the visor. I can be afraid and useful at the same time. That sentence stayed with Veshin longer than any military briefing. Fear did not stop the humans. It organized them. By the time the Turek arrived, Haven was not finished, but it was defended. 12 orbital platforms watched the approaches with overlapping fire lanes. Minefields drifted invisibly at gravitational entry points. Sensor webs extended 3 light years outward. The asteroid belt hid cold bomber wings in powered-down silence. Human carriers Carthage and Resolute Mercy held high orbit. Destroyer groups ran dark behind defense platforms. Marine companies fortified the colony perimeter with trenches, automated turrets, and fallback corridors. Evacuation routes were painted in Denari glyphs. The children's shelters had airlocks, food storage, independent power, and walls thicker than some warship hulls. Vasquez sent one message to the Turek Dominion. The Denari remnant is now under the permanent protection of United Earth. KR 7741 is sovereign Denari territory. Any incursion by Turek forces will be considered an act of war against humanity. The Denari are not yours. They are not property. They are a free people, and they are under our protection. Attached were the defense schematics. Veshin stared at her. You gave them our defenses. I gave them informed consent, Vasquez said. When they come anyway, they do not get to claim surprise. Are you truly prepared to go to war for us? Vasquez looked at him for a long time. Envoy, humanity has gone to war for terrible reasons. Land, pride, fear, revenge. We remember those reasons because we buried people under them. So when a clean reason appears, when someone is hunted and asks for help, that is not a burden. That is a privilege. 71 hours later, the Turek fleet dropped into the system like a black tide. Their ships were ugly in the way predators are ugly, built around function, hunger, and confidence. 16 capital vessels formed the center line, each one heavy enough to crack continents. Escort frigates spread to screen the flanks. Fighter bombers poured from launch bays and dark rivers, thousands of engine flares multiplying across the tactical display. Veshin stood on Carthage's command deck. He had seen the Turek burn Denara Prime. His body remembered before his mind did. His hands began to shake. Vasquez stood at the center of the deck, uniform buttoned, gray-streaked hair pulled tight, hands clasped behind her back. She watched the red contacts multiply until the full enemy formation appeared. Then she opened fleet-wide command. All units, she said. Weapons free. Show them what shelter looks like. The Turek hit the minefield first. 9 frigates vanished in 12 seconds. Not disabled. Not damaged. Gone in white spheres of fire that forced the leading edge of the formation to scatter. Debris sprayed across their approach vector. Turek escorts broke formation, engines flaring as they tried to avoid weapons they could not see. Veshin expected Vasquez to smile. She did not. She was watching how they ran. The minefield was not a wall. It was a shepherd. The surviving Turek vessels adjusted and pushed through the path of least resistance, exactly where the humans wanted them. 6 orbital defense platforms opened fire in overlapping arcs. Kinetic projectiles and directed energy beams hammered the leading capital ships from multiple angles. Shields flickered. Hulls glowed. A Turek cruiser lost its forward armor and vented atmosphere in a glittering plume. Still they came. The Turek had destroyed worlds before. They knew how to absorb losses. Their capital ships moved deeper into the system, using damaged escorts as cover, burning toward Haven with the terrible patience of executioners. Vasquez let them. Veshin could not stand it. They are getting closer. Yes. They will reach the colony. No, the human carriers launched bombers. They called them hammers. 36 heavy assault craft dropped from above the system's orbital plane, where they had been waiting cold and dark among sensor shadows. They did not look elegant. They looked like armored fists strapped to engines. Their hulls were thick, angular, scarred, and built to survive long enough to deliver bad news at close range. They fell onto the Turek capital line like gravity had chosen sides. The first wave ignored fighters, ignored escorts, ignored defensive fire. They punched through point defense storms, engines screaming, armor glowing, and drove straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Their payloads hit at knife range. 2 Turek capital ships buckled from within. A third lost its engine spine and began drifting powerless. The Turek commander pulled escorts inward to counter the bombers. Vasquez had been waiting for that too. The human destroyer group surged out from behind the defense platforms. Their engines lit blue-white. Their guns opened. They struck the thinned Turek flanks so hard that the tactical map became a bruise of red collapsing into blue pressure. Veshin watched one human destroyer close with a Turek cruiser at such short range that their shields almost touched. The destroyer took brutal hits, armor plates tearing loose, atmosphere venting, but it kept firing until the Turek cruiser's reactor failed. On the opposite flank, a human frigate faced a Turek cruiser breaking toward Haven. The frigate could not win. Everyone knew it. Its captain knew it best. The crew evacuated in 90 seconds. Escape pods launched in tight arcs. Then the empty frigate accelerated to ramming speed and drove itself into the cruiser's engine assembly. The collision shattered both vessels' silhouettes on the display, but the Turek cruiser lost propulsion and spun dead before it could reach firing range of the colony. Veshin gripped the console until his fingers hurt. They sacrificed a ship for us. Vasquez's eyes remained on the battle, for the children under it. The battle reached Haven's atmosphere anyway. 12 Turek dropships broke through a gap and dove toward the half-built colony. On the surface, alarms howled. Denari families crowded into reinforced shelters. Children clutched toys humans had brought from Sol. Elderly survivors whispered the names of relatives lost on Denara Prime. Outside, human construction workers became stretcher teams, firefighters, ammunition carriers, and guides. The school frame Marco had welded became a defensive landmark. Colonel Patricia Hartley, ground commander, spoke 3 words. Ground teams, engage. The Turek landed hard outside the western construction zone. Their infantry spilled from armored dropships and black combat shells, taller and heavier than humans. Weapons raised toward the civilian quarter. They expected frightened refugees and unfinished buildings. They found Marines. Human Marines had spent 3 days turning the colony's skeleton into a maze of kill lanes, covered approaches, fallback doors, and shielded corridors. They fought from foundation trenches. They fired from half-built classrooms. They used stacked wall panels as barricades and construction cranes as line-of-sight blockers. Automated turrets opened from cargo containers. Medical drones pulled civilians deeper underground. Sergeant Daniel Holloway held the entrance to Children's Shelter 3 with 2 Marines, a cracked rifle, and a face that seemed carved from refusal. 300 Denari children were inside. The Turek pushed toward the shelter. Holloway did not move. The camera feed shook from explosions. Dust turned the air white. 1 Marine fell wounded and crawled back behind the barricade. Holloway grabbed his collar, dragged him clear, and kept firing one-handed until reinforcements dropped behind the Turek landing zone. Veshin watched from orbit, unable to breathe. A human he had never met was standing between alien soldiers and Denari children, as if those children had been born under Earth's sun. The ground assault broke in 4 hours. The orbital battle broke in 6. The Turek commander, desperate and furious, gathered his remaining ships into a final formation aimed directly at Haven. A scorched earth drive. If he could not take the system, he would burn the colony and call the destruction victory. Vasquez finally gave the order she had been holding. Wake reserve hammers. The second bomber wing emerged from the asteroid belt behind the Turek flagship. 12 craft had waited the entire battle powered down among rocks, crews silent, engines cold, faith placed in timing and discipline. Now they ignited as one. They struck the flagship's rear shields, weakened by hours of combat, and power redirected forward. The first payload collapsed the shield. The second breached propulsion. The third severed command distribution. The Turek flagship went dark. The enemy formation fractured. Some captains pushed forward. Some turned back. Some froze. The humans did not. They surged. Destroyers cut escape angles. Fighters herded damaged ships away from haven. Defense platforms shifted fire from destruction to disabling shots. Bombers targeted engines and jump drives. Turek vessels began losing movement faster than they lost hull integrity. Then the Turek commander opened a channel. His voice was bitter, cracked, and confused. You would die for creatures that are not even your species? Vasquez answered across every channel in the system. They asked for our help. That makes them ours. And we do not abandon what is ours. The remaining Turek ships tried to run. Vasquez turned to Veshin. I need your permission for what comes next. He stared at her. A general commanding enough firepower to shatter the fleet that had destroyed his world was asking permission from a refugee envoy who owned nothing but grief. You mean that? He said. Yes. What will you do? Make sure they cannot come back believing next time will be easier. Veshin looked at the tactical display. He thought of Dinara Prime. He thought of schools burning. He thought of the child born on the 7th day of waiting. He thought of Marco welding a school under the shadow of invasion. He thought of Holloway at the shelter door. Yes, he said. The pursuit was not a slaughter. That almost frightened Veshin more. Human ships moved with terrifying coordination, not chasing in rage, but closing like a machine designed to leave no useful path. Destroyers cut lateral escape. Carriers sealed vertical vectors. Bombers curved behind the retreating fleet like jaws. Fighters marked engines. Platforms fired only at jump systems. Ship after ship lost faster than light capacity and drifted powerless but alive. When it ended, 11 Turek capital ships and 22 escorts sat stranded at the edge of the system. Their weapons were disabled. Their life support remained intact. Their crews would live long enough to be rescued by their own people. Vasquez sent one final message to the Dominion. Not a boast. A target list. 6 secret Turek military installations appeared in the transmission. Shipyards, fuel depots, command stations, sensor arrays, all deep inside Dominion territory. The Denari are permanently under human protection. This protection is not limited to defense. Any future aggression against the Denari, in this system or any other, will be met with counteroffensive action against Turek military infrastructure. The attached coordinates are not a bluff. We know where you live. Choose carefully. Veshin turned to her. How did you find those? Vasquez allowed herself a tired smile. We have been watching predators longer than predators think. The Turek did not return. Not immediately. But the galaxy changed overnight. Every power that had rejected the Denari suddenly discovered concern. The Galactic Concord issued a statement condemning unilateral destabilizing intervention while quietly accelerating refugee policy review. The Velthri Federation offered ecological assistance to Haven. Pelin declined with lethal politeness. The Redhani Combined sent a private inquiry about mutual defense. Vasquez forwarded it to Veshin for comment. He answered with a file containing the original servitude proposal in one sentence. Never trust a door that opens only after someone else breaks the lock. Within 2 weeks, 3 more messages reached Sol. The Kathani, driven out by corporate strip mining fleets. The Pelori, whose colony had cracked in a geological disaster while neighboring systems debated liability. The Drenivani, a hidden people hunted for generations by a regional power that erased small civilizations quietly. Each message asked the same thing in different words. We heard what you did for the Denari. Can you help us too? Vasquez read them in her quarters aboard Carthage, and for the first time Veshin saw the weight settle fully on her shoulders. Not regret. Not hesitation. The burden of a door opened on purpose. This is what we wanted, she said. Not dependency. Not worship. A change in the equation. You cannot save everyone, Veshin said. No, Vasquez replied. But we can make it harder for everyone to pretend no one can be saved. Haven grew. The colony's first harvest came from biodomes planted while missile craters still smoked beyond the perimeter. Denari grain rose in soil engineered by human agronomists and tended by Denari farmers who wept when the first stalks bent under their own weight. The first school opened in Marco Bellini's building. 600 children walked through the doors under natural amber light, while Marines stood outside in dress uniforms, pretending not to cry. The Central Commons opened with music. For the first time since Dinara Prime burned, Dinari instruments played the old river songs. Sound filled the dome, spilled through open doors, and drifted into the new streets. Humans stopped welding. Marines lowered their rifles. Children listened. Elders wept. Helen stood beside Veshin and covered her mouth with both hands because grief and gratitude had finally become impossible to separate. Vasquez transferred command of the orbital defense grid to the Dinari Human Defense Council on the 63rd day. She handed Veshin the signed document in the Carthage war room. He did not know how to respond to a human salute, so he placed a hand over his heart in the Dinari gesture of deepest respect. Vasquez nodded. That was enough. Okafor gave him the colony master key the same day. A simple metal card encoded with access to life support, water systems, power grids, transportation controls, school locks, medical networks, and defense platforms. It is your home, Okafor said. We just helped build it. 3 days later, the main human fleet prepared to depart. Not all of it. A permanent garrison remained. A marine company. Defense platform technicians. A communications team linked to Earth's early warning network. Construction crews stayed to finish the shipyard. Teachers stayed. Agronomists stayed. Doctors stayed. But Carthage and the war fleet would leave. Veshin met Vasquez one last time in the Central Commons. She was out of uniform, wearing a simple gray shirt, her face lined with exhaustion. Without insignia, she looked smaller, more human, and somehow greater for it. He tried to thank her. He failed several times. Finally, he said, every species we asked saw us as a burden. A budget problem. A future complication. You saw us as people. You treated us as neighbors. You fought for us as if we were your own. Vasquez corrected him gently. Not as if. Veshin went still. She leaned forward. Envoy, neighbors help each other. They build fences. They watch children. They bring food when the house burns. And when something comes out of the dark, they stand on the porch with a rifle. It is not complicated. To you. It should not be complicated to anyone. She stood. Build something beautiful here. Build something that lasts. And when you are strong again, pass it on. Find someone else running and give them what we gave you. That is the only payment we want. The Carthage broke orbit that afternoon. 300 ships rose into Haven's amber sky. Engines bright, hulls scarred, weapons quiet. Children filled the observation domes. Dinari musicians played the river songs louder. Helen stood beside Veshin as the fleet climbed toward the stars. We asked them for shelter, she said. Veshin watched the last human carrier become a point of light. They gave us a home. For 7 years, Haven kept growing. The shipyard produced its first Dinari-built vessel in the 3rd year. They named it Velsha, after the child born during the waiting days. It was not a warship. It was a rescue frigate, white-hulled, blue-engined, armed enough to discourage predators, and equipped with enough medical capacity to make purpose clear. In the 5th year, Haven received its first refugee fleet, 19 Kathani vessels fleeing corporate raiders. Veshin was there when the message arrived. He did not convene a committee. He did not draft 11 pages of conditional acceptance. He opened the channel. Hold position, he said, voice steady. Help is en route. Helen, older now, smiled beside him. The Dinari sent Velsha, 3 cargo ships, 2 medical vessels, and a squadron of human-trained pilots from Haven's Defense Academy. When corporate raiders followed the Kathani into the system, they found Dinari ships in formation and human platforms powering up behind them. The raiders left. They chose carefully. By the 10th year, the Haven doctrine spread across the border systems. Send the truth. Hold position. Someone will come. Not always humans. That was the miracle. The Dinari came. The Kathani came. The Pelori came after humans helped rebuild their cracked colony. The Drenavani came out of hiding and joined the relay network. A chain of shelter fortresses grew across neglected space, each one built with gardens, schools, medical centers, and teeth. Predators hated them. Refugees found them by rumor, then by beacon, then by map. The Galactic Concord tried to regulate the network. Vasquez, retired by then but still allergic to foolishness, attended the hearing. She listened to 6 hours of speeches about jurisdiction, proportional response, refugee burden, border stability, and unauthorized humanitarian militarization. Then she stood and said, "When your procedures move faster than hunger, we will consult them first." The hearing ended badly for the Concord. It ended very well for everyone else. The final test came 22 years after the Denari distress call. The Turek Dominion collapsed into civil war. For decades, its rulers had survived by conquest. Once their military credibility shattered at Haven, subject worlds began resisting. Slave stations revolted. Border fleets defected. Commanders turned on one another. The Dominion did not fall cleanly. Empires never do. They crack, bleed, deny, and drag innocence into the collapse. A Turek splinter admiral named Kor Valn seized a planet called Marrow's Rest, home to 12 million Turek civilians and 4 million subject laborers from conquered species. Valn surrounded the planet with loyalist ships and threatened to ignite the atmosphere if any rebellion entered orbit. The message that reached Haven was not from a government. It was from Turek children. A classroom transmission, smuggled through an old emergency relay by a teacher with shaking hands. "We are not soldiers. Please do not let him burn the sky." Veshin listened to it in the same communications bay where, decades earlier, he had once received humanity's answer. His people watched him. The Denari remembered Denara Prime. They remembered Turek warships turning their world to glass. They remembered starvation, drift, rejection, terror. They remembered the enemy. Helen stood beside Veshin, older, silver around her temples, eyes still sharp. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Veshin replayed the children's message. He thought of Vasquez. "They asked for our help. That makes them ours." He opened the channel to Earth. General Vasquez appeared from her retirement home, hair white now, shoulders wrapped in a simple blanket, eyes still burning with that old controlled fire. "I heard," she said. Veshin's voice was quiet. "We are going." Vasquez nodded once. "I know." The Haven fleet launched within 6 hours. Not as dependents under human protection. As neighbors. Denari rescue frigates led the convoy. Human carriers joined from Sol. Kathani shield barges came from the outer network. Pelori atmospheric engineers brought sky stabilizers. Drenavani stealth ships carried evacuation beacons. Even former Turek defectors came, their vessels repainted with white bands and blue humanitarian markings. Veshin commanded from the bridge of Velsha. Helen served beside him. On the main display, Marrow's Rest appeared beneath a cage of hostile ships. Admiral Kor Valn broadcast first. "Denari," he sneered, recognizing their signatures. "Have you come to watch Turek children burn as yours did?" The bridge went silent. Every Denari officer felt the wound open. Veshin closed his eyes for one breath. Then he answered, "No. We came because they are children." The battle for Marrow's Rest was not like Haven. At Haven, humans had been the shield around a dying people. At Marrow's Rest, the save became the shield. Denari pilots flew through orbital fire to deploy evacuation corridors. Human destroyers disabled loyalist cruisers without cracking their habitats. Kathani shield barges absorbed atmosphere ignition beams until their hulls glowed. Pelori engineers stabilized the upper sky with emergency chemical dispersal arrays. Drenavani stealth ships inserted rescue teams into schools, hospitals, and labor camps. Valn tried to fire the atmosphere weapon. Velsha rammed its control relay. Not with crew aboard. The crew had evacuated 90 seconds before impact, because human instructors had taught Denari cadets that a ship could be sacrificed without sacrificing lives if planning began early enough. The relay shattered. The weapon died. Kor Valn was captured by his own officers when they realized the Denari fleet was evacuating Turek civilians too. The teacher who had sent the message met Veshin on the surface 2 days later. She was Turek, tall, gray-skinned, trembling with exhaustion, surrounded by children who kept staring at Denari uniforms with fear and confusion. "I do not understand," she said. "After what we did to you." Veshin looked across the damaged schoolyard where Denari medics treated Turek children under emergency lights. "Neither did I once." "What changed?" He watched a human marine kneel to show a child how to fold paper into a small bird. "A neighbor taught us." Years later, when Veshin was old and Haven no longer looked new, he recorded one final message for the Galactic Archive. He stood in the central commons beneath the Great Dome. Outside, the amber fields stretched wide and green. The first school had expanded into a university. The defense platforms still glittered overhead, but so did rescue docks, garden satellites, music relays, and the orbital shipyard where the next generation of Denari vessels waited to launch. Helen sat nearby, pretending not to supervise his wording. Children ran through the comments. Dinari and Kathani and Pelori and Drinavani and even Turuk, because after Marrow's rest, some families had asked to settle on Haven, and the Dinari had argued for months before saying yes. Not forgetting, not excusing, choosing. Veshin began recording. "My name is Veshin Cole," he said. "I was once the senior envoy of a dead world." He paused, then smiled. "That is no longer the most important thing about me." He looked up through the dome at Haven's sky. "I am also a citizen of a living one." He told the archive about Dinara Prime, about 42 ships, about rejection dressed as procedure, about the 5-sentence message, about the human fleet that blotted out the stars, about General Adrian Vasquez, who did not offer a camp but a fortress, about Colonel Okafor, who insisted refugees deserved windows, about Marco Bellini, who built a school while an invasion fleet approached, about Sergeant Holloway at the children's shelter, about the Carthage, the hammers, the defense grid, the battle, the target list, and the strange human belief that shelter should come with walls strong enough to offend predators. He told them about the paper bird. He told them about the first harvest. He told them about Marrow's rest. Then he leaned closer to the recorder. "If you are out there and you are running, send the message. Do not dress it in diplomatic language. Do not bargain with your own worth. Tell the truth. Say you need help." His voice trembled, but did not break. "The humans taught us this, and we have spent our lives proving they were right. Help is not charity when it becomes a duty shared by the rescued. Shelter is not a room where fear waits quietly. Shelter is a promise with engines, gardens, schools, shields, and people willing to stand between you and the dark." Pelin reached over and placed her hand on his. Veshin finished the message. "Send the message. Someone will come. And when you are strong again, become the answer for someone else." The transmission entered the Haven relay network and spread beyond every border that had once ignored them. On Earth, an elderly Adrian Vasquez watched it from a porch overlooking the sea. Her granddaughter sat beside her, wearing a cadet jacket too large for her shoulders. "Did you know it would become this?" the girl asked. Vasquez looked at the horizon. "No, were you hoping?" The old general smiled. "I was building." Above Earth, a new convoy formed. Not because the Dinari were in danger. Because somewhere beyond the Perseus arm, a small species had sent a message with no ceremony, no bargaining, no pride left to protect. "We are here. We are afraid. Can anyone hear us?" The answer went out from Haven first, then Earth, then Kathani space, then Pelori stations, then Drinavani relays, then Marrow's rest. Thousands of ships turned in the dark, supply freighters leading, warships guarding, builders following, doctors ready, teachers packed, seeds stored, toys labeled, defense platforms waiting in cargo cradles. The old galaxy had taught the weak to whisper. The new one taught them to call. And every time they did, the stars moved. Not for conquest, not for profit, not for glory, for shelter, for home, for the simple, impossible, revolutionary belief that when someone asks for help, the answer should not be paperwork. It should be engines lighting in the dark. The first time the Haven relay received a message from a species that did not know how to ask for help, the transmission was only breathing. No words, no coordinates at first, no proper distress header, just a fragile pulse of static, a broken carrier wave, and something on the other end inhaling and exhaling, as if the sender had crawled to a transmitter with the last strength in their body and forgotten every language except survival. The relay operators almost classified it as corrupted background noise. A Dinari cadet named Selvin Arrow refused. He was 19 years old, born on Haven in the second year after the humans built the colony, and he had grown up under a sky protected by orbital platforms and stories. He had heard the tale of the 5-sentence message so often that it had stopped sounding like history and started sounding like a rule of physics. If someone calls, you answer. If the call is broken, you listen harder. So he isolated the breathing, expanded the carrier distortion, and found the coordinates hidden beneath it. Then he found the second layer, a star map. Then the third, a child's voice, speaking in a language the Haven computers did not know. Selvin sent the signal to the senior watch officer, who sent it to Pelin, who was older now and no longer pretended she was not tired, who sent it to Veshin Cole at the Central Commons, where he had been addressing a group of visiting students from Marrow's Rest. Veshin stopped mid-sentence when the message reached his wrist display. Helen's face appeared above it. You need to come to the relay chamber. He knew that tone. He had first heard it decades ago when she said there is one more option. What is it? A call. Who? We do not know yet. Veshin looked at the students in front of him. Dinari, Kathani, Pelori, Drinavani, Turek, Human, and half a dozen others whose families had reached Haven by beacon or rumor. They looked back at him with the wide-eyed attention of children who had been raised in a galaxy where help was something that moved. He touched the display, put it through the open hall. Helen hesitated. Veshin. All of it. The central commons quieted as the broken signal filled the dome. Breathing. Static. A child's voice. Then the translation system caught one word, then another, then failed, then tried again. Sky burning. Doors closed. Parents gone. They told us no one hears small worlds. Please hear small worlds. No one moved. Even the children understood. Veshin closed his eyes. For one breath, he was back on the cargo hauler watching Dinara Prime burn. Back in the months of drift. Back in the cold ache of unanswered messages. Back at the Carthage command deck, hearing General Vasquez say that someone asking for help was all it ever took. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer only the envoy of a dead world. He was the citizen of a living one. Activate the Haven fleet, he said. Send the truth to Earth, Kathani space, Pelori stations, Drinavani relays, Marrow's Rest, and every shelter fortress in the network. Tell them this is not a drill. Helen's face hardened with the old controlled fury he had once seen in Vasquez. And the message? Veshin looked up through the dome at the glittering defense platforms above Haven. Answer it. 6 minutes later, the Haven relay transmitted across the dark. We hear you. Hold position if you can. Hide if you must. Help is en route. The coordinates led to a region the old galactic maps marked as economically irrelevant. That was how the violence had hidden there. The system was called Arutel by its inhabitants, though the Concord database had never bothered preserving the local name. It held one dim orange star, 4 rocky planets, 2 gas giants, and a ring of small habitats built by a species known as the Lethari. They were small-bodied, soft-voiced, and biologically delicate by most galactic standards. They made glasswork that could store music in color. They had no empire, no fleet, no strategic minerals rare enough to make them famous. Their only crime was being located between 3 new trade corridors and lacking the weapons to say no. The attackers were not the Turek. That made it worse. They were a private security consortium called the Marikai Asset Recovery Group, a corporate military force that specialized in seizing defaulted infrastructure from weak systems after arranging the defaults themselves. Their contracts were legal in 7 jurisdictions, tolerated in 12, and ignored by the Concord unless the victims had influential allies. The Lethari had no allies. Marikai ships had surrounded their largest orbital habitat, shut down outbound traffic, and declared the system under emergency receivership. When local officials resisted, Marikai boarding teams took control of water stations and food processors. When civilian ships tried to flee, they were disabled and towed back. When one habitat governor appealed to the Concord, Marikai transmitted a debt claim 400 pages long. Then they began removing children from the habitats. Not publicly, not officially. They called it protective custody pending labor compliance. That was when a Lethari teacher broke into an old maintenance array, found a transmitter, and sent a message with no language left except fear. The rescue fleet launched from Haven in waves. The first wave was fast, Dinari rescue frigates, Drinavani stealth couriers, human rapid response destroyers, and Kathani shield cutters. The second wave carried mass, human carriers, Pelori atmospheric stabilizers, Dinari medical ships, Kathani food barges, Marrow's Rest civilian transports, and mobile school modules because no one on Haven had forgotten what Marco Bellini built under fire. The third wave carried teeth, the Carthage, older now but still terrible, the Haven-built defense cruiser Velsha, for Earth destroyer groups, 2 Kathani shield walls, and the human 6th Rapid Response Fleet under Admiral Sofia Okonkwo, General Vasquez's former student. Vasquez herself could no longer command in person. Age had bent her shoulders, but not her voice. She appeared on Veshin's private channel as the fleet gathered at Haven's outer marker. White hair, brown face lined by years. a blanket over her knees. Behind her, the sea moved beyond a porch railing on earth. I heard the signal, she said. We are going. I know. Veshin smiled faintly. You keep saying that. Because you keep becoming exactly who I hoped you would become. The words struck harder than he expected. For a moment he was young again, desperate, ashamed of needing help, standing in front of a human general who had arrived with a fleet and called it proportional. Do you have advice? He asked. Vasquez leaned closer. Yes. Do not let righteous anger choose your targets. Make it choose your speed. Veshin nodded. An envoy? Yes. When you find the children, move faster than fear. The channel closed. The fleet jumped. A Rutel appeared before them wrapped in silence. Not natural silence. Occupation silence. The kind produced when every civilian transmitter has been forced off, every dock authority replaced, every emergency beacon threatened into quiet. Maracai ships hung around the habitats in predatory rings. Contract cruisers, enforcement frigates, drone carriers, boarding barges painted with corporate logos, and one heavy command ship called Profit Mandate, a name so honest it felt obscene. Veshin stood on the bridge of Velsha, no longer merely observing war, but commanding part of the answer. Pelin stood beside him, silver-haired and steady. Admiral Okonkwo appeared on the main screen from the Carthage. She was younger than Vasquez had been at Haven, with close-cropped black hair, dark eyes, and a calm that had clearly been inherited through training rather than blood. We are inside their outer sensor web, Okonkwo said. They see us. Have they responded? Not yet. They are calculating whether we are profitable to resist. Okonkwo's mouth tightened. Let's make the math unpleasant. The Maracai transmission came 90 seconds later. This system is under lawful receivership by Maracai Asset Recovery Group. Incoming armed vessels are ordered to halt outside the regulatory boundary. Any interference with contracted enforcement activities will be considered piracy. Veshin looked at the tactical display. The Lethari habitats glowed pale green, surrounded by red threat markers. Thousands of civilian life signs. Schools locked down. Water stations under guard. Children concentrated in 3 detention bays aboard a Maracai transport. Helen saw it too. Her voice went cold. They put the children on a ship. Okonkwo said nothing for a moment. Then, Veshin, permission to take point? Veshin remembered Vasquez asking him for permission after the battle for Haven. That memory had become a law inside him. Granted, he said, but we rescue first. Okonkwo nodded. Always. She opened a system-wide broadcast. This is Admiral Sophia Okonkwo of United Earth, operating under the Haven Relay Protection Network. The Lethari system has transmitted a distress request. Your receivership claim is rejected. You will restore civilian control, release all detained persons, power down weapons, and prepare for legal seizure of records related to forced labor, abduction, and coercive blockade. Profit Mandate answered with laughter. Not literal laughter. A packet transmission of amusement tones, legal notices, and threat clauses. Your humanitarian posturing has no standing here. Okonkwo's face remained calm. Then let me translate. Let the children go. Maracai weapons powered up. The battle began with the Drenavani. They were invisible until the first detention transport lost its engines. 3 Drenavani stealth ships slipped between Maracai patrol arcs and attached silent clamps to the transport's drive spine. Before the corporate fleet realized anything had happened, Denari rescue pods were already launching from Velsha, painted cream white and blue, each one broadcasting in Lethari language. Stay low. Cover your eyes. We are opening the doors. Maracai drones moved to intercept. Kathani shield cutters arrived first, unfolding blue-white barrier wings around the rescue pods. Drone fire splashed harmlessly across the shields. Human fighters from the Carthage streaked past in tight formation, disabling the drones with precision bursts that left them spinning dead but unexploded. Veshin watched the rescue feed. The detention bay doors opened. Inside, hundreds of Lethari children huddled under emergency lighting. A Denari rescue medic stepped through first. Not human. Denari. One of Haven's own. The medic knelt, removed her helmet, and spoke the first phrase every Haven child learned in 12 languages. We came because you asked. Children began to cry. Helen turned away for 1 second, then turned back with her face composed and eyes bright. Maracai escalated. Profit Mandate ordered all contract cruisers to break through the rescue screen and seize the Lethari central habitat as leverage. 6 cruisers accelerated toward the largest orbital city, weapons hot, confident that the rescue fleet would hesitate to fire near civilians. They were right. The rescue fleet did hesitate. For half a second. Then the Pelori atmospheric engineers fired gravity foam into the cruiser's path. The strange silver-blue substance expanded across space like frozen mist, not stopping the ships, but altering their momentum curve just enough. Human destroyers slid into the new angles and fired disabling shots into exposed thruster vanes. Denari frigates targeted communication spines. Kathani shield barges took the return fire. Amero's Rest Turek defector cruiser, crewed by the descendants of former enemies, placed itself between Profit Mandate and a Lethari hospital station. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. Veshin opened a channel to the Marikai command ship. You are firing on hospital and school zones. Profit Mandate responded with legal code. Civilian infrastructure is collateral against non-compliant assets. Pelin spoke before Veshin could. Record that. The ship's AI chimed. Record it. Transmit to every jurisdiction that licenses them. Transmitting. For the first time, the Marikai fleet faltered. Predators that hide behind law fear evidence more than missiles. Okonkwo saw the hesitation and struck. The Carthage launched its hammers. Not the same bombers from Haven. Newer. Faster. Still ugly. Still honest. They dropped from high vector, escorted by Broken Shelter Squadron, a mixed wing of human and Denari pilots trained in the same academy. The hammers did not attack the habitats, did not attack the detention transport, did not even attack the cruisers threatening the civilians. They hit the corporate command architecture. 3 data relay ships vanished under non-nuclear disabling payloads. Profit Mandate lost contract synchronization across its drone network. Enforcement frigates suddenly stopped receiving updated legal threat packets. Automated turrets entered safe mode. Boarding barges froze mid-maneuver as their ownership authentication systems began arguing with themselves. Dr. Zarek, who had somehow become an interstellar consultant on impossible rescue engineering despite being elderly and officially retired 6 times, appeared on a side channel from the science cruiser equation lantern. I inserted a procedural review loop into their enforcement software, he said proudly. Their drones must now determine whether abducting children violates their own liability policy. Okonkwo blinked. How long will that hold? Given the moral quality of their code base, perhaps forever. Veshin almost laughed. Then Profit Mandate fired on the Lethari central habitat. Not a full-strength strike. A warning shot. Enough to puncture one agricultural ring and send atmosphere venting into space. The mood changed instantly. Okonkwo's calm did not vanish. It sharpened into something bright and cold. All rescue units, accelerate evacuation. All shield units, cover habitat breaches. All strike units, remove their weapons. The word remove traveled through the fleet like a blade leaving its sheath. Human destroyers advanced. Denari frigates advanced with them. Kathani shield barges opened corridors. Turek defector cruisers took flanking positions. Drenavani stealth ships marked every weapon node on every Marikai vessel with targeting ghosts. Then the Haven network showed Marikai what it had learned from humans. Not rage. Sequence. Step 1. Blind them. Drenavani pulses shattered long-range targeting. Step 2. Pin them. Kathani shields boxed cruisers into narrow lanes. Step 3. Cut them. Human and Denari strike craft took engines, turrets, drone bays, and jump drives. Step 4. Save everyone anyway. Pelori stabilizers sealed the habitat breach. Medical pods attached to the agricultural ring. Rescue workers pulled Lethari farmers out of freezing corridors while combat still flashed beyond the windows. A Marikai cruiser tried to run. Velsha intercepted. Veshin felt the old fear rise as the enemy vessel turned toward open space. Running predators come back. When no one teaches them not to. But he also remembered Vasquez's warning. Do not let righteous anger choose your targets. Disable jump only, he ordered. Velsha fired. The cruiser's jump ring collapsed in a spray of blue sparks. Its life support remained untouched. Helen glanced at him. You sounded like her. Good. Profit Mandate was the last to fall. Its captain, a Marikai executive officer named Director Havron, opened a private channel to Veshin as human boarding craft approached. You misunderstand the galaxy, Envoy. You think this changes something. It does not. Weak systems always fall. If not to us, then to someone else. You cannot build a fleet large enough to answer every cry. Veshin looked at him. Behind Havrun, the corporate bridge was shaking. Behind Veshin, Haven officers coordinated rescue corridors with practiced urgency. On another display, Lethari children were being transferred to medical ships. On another, Turek volunteers carried wounded Marikai crew out of a burning enforcement frigate because the Haven doctrine had become stubborn in ways even former enemies obeyed. You are right, Veshin said. Havrun smiled. Veshin continued. We cannot answer every cry alone. The smile faded. That was your mistake. You thought help was a resource controlled by the strong. It is not. It is a habit that spreads. The boarding craft attached. Marikai security troops surrendered within 14 minutes. Not because they had become moral. Because every escape vector ended in a shield, every weapon had been disabled, every crime had been recorded, and every captured crew member was being treated better by their enemies than their own company had ever treated them. Arutel was liberated in 9 hours. The Lethari teacher who sent the first message met Veshin aboard Velsha the next day. She was small, translucent-winged, and still shaking from exhaustion. Her name translated as Ilari of the Blue Glass School. I did not think anyone would hear, she said. Veshin looked through the observation window at the rescue fleet repairing the habitat ring. Human construction crews were already welding. Denari medics were already organizing clinics. Pelori engineers were stabilizing atmosphere. Kathani food barges were unloading crops. Drenavani technicians were teaching Lethari operators how to hide emergency transmitters where corporations would never find them. I once thought the same, Veshin said. How do we repay this? He smiled and heard Vasquez in his own voice. When you are strong again, pass it on. The fall of Marikai Asset Recovery Group took 11 months. Not because the fleet destroyed them, because the fleet took their records. Every debt trap, every false receivership, every abducted child, every seized water station, every bribed official, every jurisdiction that had pretended not to understand the violence hidden inside contract language. The Haven Network broadcast the evidence everywhere. Some courts tried to bury it. Human journalists did not allow that. Denari archivists preserved it. Lethari glass singers turned the testimony into color music that could not be watched without weeping. Turek defectors testified about the difference between orders and excuses. The Galactic Concord tried once again to issue a statement about destabilization. This time, no one listened. By the end of the year, 23 systems canceled Marikai contracts. 7 corporate fleets surrendered licenses. 4 corrupt governors fled. 2 were captured by their own security forces. The first Interstellar Refugee and Civilian Protection Court was established not on Earth, not on Haven, but on Arutel, at the request of the Lethari. Above the courthouse entrance, in Denari, human standard, Lethari color script, Turek, Kathani, Pelori, Drenavani, and dozens more, were carved the words, "Send the truth. Someone will come." Years passed again. The Haven relay became too large to call a network. It became weather, a constant condition of the borderlands. Always listening, always moving, always arguing with itself about jurisdiction, supply chains, and whether school modules should be included in first-wave or second-wave deployments. The answer, after Marco Bellini testified before the Planning Council, was first-wave. Vasquez died in the 31st year after Haven. She died peacefully on Earth, on the porch facing the sea, with her granddaughter beside her and a half-finished message on her lap. Her final words, according to family record, were, "Make sure they loaded the seeds." The funeral was small by her request and enormous by reality. Ships came from Haven, Arutel, Marrow's Rest, Kathani Shield Home, Pelori New Stone, Drenavani Freehold, and worlds that had once been only coordinates on someone else's neglect. No war formation. No victory parade. They arrived in rescue formation, supply ships leading, warships guarding, builders following. Veshin was too old to travel easily, but he went. He stood on Earth under a blue sky that looked painfully alive and placed a Denari memory crystal beside her grave. Inside it was the sound of the first music played in Haven's Commons after the battle. Helen, leaning on a cane beside him, whispered, she would have complained about all these speeches. Veshin nodded, and secretly listened to everyone. Admiral Okonkwo, now commander of the expanded relay fleet, gave the final words. She taught us that shelter is not where you hide from the dark. Shelter is what you build so the dark learns to stop coming. No one spoke for a long time after that. Then, from the back of the crowd, a Lethari child began humming a glass song. One by one, others joined. Dinari voices, human voices, Kathani throat harmonies, Turek low chords, Pelori wind flutes, Drinavani whisper tones. The song rose over the sea and into the sky, where thousands of ships held orbit in silence. Veshin realized then that Vasquez had not founded an alliance. She had started a reflex. The final crisis of Veshin's life came when he was 92. By then, Haven had cities, not camps, not emergency settlements. Cities with old neighborhoods, loud markets, train stations, gardens, universities, shipyards, concert halls, and children who rolled their eyes when elders told the story of the 42 ships because they had heard it 1,000 times and loved it anyway. The crisis began with the death of a star. A red giant in the remote Elevar cluster destabilized centuries earlier than predicted. Its outer shell expanded violently, threatening 7 inhabited moons and dozens of orbital habitats. The people there were not victims of war. No villain had caused it. There was no enemy to frighten, no fleet to defeat, no predator to teach. Only physics. 22 billion lives sat under a sky that was turning against them. The old galaxy would have debated Trioff. The Haven relay did not. Every beacon lit. Earth sent solar engineers. Haven sent evacuation coordinators. Arutel sent habitat repair crews. Marrow's Rest sent atmospheric shield ships. Kathani sent gravity barges. Pelori sent world stabilization teams. Drinavani sent stealth pathfinders through radiation storms. Even former Marikai shipwrights, now working under restitution contracts, sent heavy lifters. The operation was too large to command from one place, so it was commanded from everywhere. That had become the relay way. Shared maps, shared authority, local consent, fast action, no throne, no single savior. Thousands of ships arrived in waves so dense they turned the dying star's light into broken gold. Veshin watched from Haven's central relay chamber, too frail to travel, Pelin beside him as always. The first moon was evacuated in 30 hours. The second in 40. The third nearly failed when a radiation surge blinded half the guidance web, but a squadron of young Dinari pilots flew manual beacon patterns through the storm, singing old river songs over comms to keep time. The fourth moon refused to leave its ancestral burial sites until Lethari glass workers and human archivists built portable memory vaults in orbit and promised that the dead would travel with the living. The fifth moon housed a species that had once voted against refugee protections in the Concord. No one mentioned it. Their children boarded evacuation ships alongside everyone else. The sixth moon broke apart before evacuation completed. Kathani gravity barges held the fragments together for 6 hours. Long enough. The seventh moon survived because a fleet of construction ships built a temporary shield between it and the star using dismantled cargo carriers, frozen comet mass, and a progenitor-derived reflective lattice that 3 ethics committees had previously declared impractical, which engineers interpreted as not yet tested under exciting conditions. 22 billion lives were saved. Not all homes. Not all histories. Not all places. Loss remained. Grief remained. The relay did not make tragedy vanish. It made extinction harder. After the Elevar rescue, the Galactic Concord finally dissolved itself. It did not collapse in disgrace. It transformed, which was rarer and more difficult. Its old chambers became the assembly of answering worlds. Membership no longer depended on wealth, fleet tonnage, or territorial stability, but on a pledge simple enough for children and severe enough for empires. When the call is true, we move. Haven was chosen as the first meeting site. Veshin was asked to open the inaugural session. He nearly refused. He was old. His voice was thin. His body hurt in ways that made mornings feel like negotiations. Pelin told him he would go because history had already done most of the work and the least he could do was show up. So he did. He stood beneath the great dome of Haven's Central Commons, now expanded into an assembly hall large enough to hold representatives from hundreds of worlds. Above them, through the transparent ceiling, the original 12 orbital defense platforms still glittered. Around them moved newer things: rescue docks, hospital rings, school transports, seed vaults, and the shipyard where Velsha's successors waited with warm engines. Veshin placed both hands on the podium. "I once sent a message because my people were dying," he said. "I thought I was asking for shelter. I was wrong. I was asking whether the galaxy had room for us to matter." The hall remained silent. The first answer came from humans. But the final answer did not remain human. That is the important part. A mercy that belongs to one species can become pride. A mercy that is passed on becomes civilization. He looked toward the Dinari children seated with Lethari, Turek, Kathani, Pelori, Human, Drenavani, and others. We were rescued. Then we rescued. Then those we rescued others. That is how a refugee fleet became a home, how a home became a beacon, how a beacon became a network, and how a network became the beginning of a better galaxy. His voice trembled. Helen stood from her chair and placed a hand on his back. He continued, "Do not misunderstand us. We still build defenses. We still carry weapons. We still train fleets. Shelter without strength is a wish, and wishes do not stop predators, radiation storms, hunger, or collapsing stars. But strength without shelter is only another form of hunger. We choose both: gardens and guns, schools and shields, songs and engines." Above the dome, a formation of ships crossed Haven's sky. At the front flew the old Carthage, preserved and recommissioned as a training carrier. Beside it flew Velsha, the first Dinari rescue frigate. Around them flew ships from every answering world, not in conquest formation, not in war posture, but in the pattern Vasquez had used on the first day. Supply ships leading, warships guarding, builders following. Veshin smiled. "Long ago, General Adrian Vasquez told me that neighbors help each other. At the time, I thought it was too simple to be true. I was a diplomat. We are trained to distrust simple truths. I was wrong. It was simple. It was also difficult. Most true things are." He looked at the assembly one last time. "So here is the law we leave our children. If you are strong, answer. If you are saved, remember. If you are afraid, move anyway. If someone is running, open the door. And when the dark comes, do not send paperwork into it." He raised his hand toward the ships above. "Send engines." The assembly stood, not for him alone, for everyone who had answered, for the 42 ships, for the 5-sentence message, for the human fleet that had blotted out the stars, for the first school built under threat of invasion, for the marine at the shelter door, for the paper bird, for the Turek children at Marrow's Rest, for the Lethari teacher who sent breathing into static, for the billions pulled from the Elevar light, for every small world that had once been told no one hears small worlds. Veshin stepped down from the podium into Pellin's waiting arm. "You did well," she said. He exhaled. "You were right. I usually am. I know." She smiled. "Still irritating?" Deeply. They walked slowly through the commons together while the assembly sang, not one anthem, but many songs layered into something imperfect and alive. Veshin lived 3 more years. His final days were spent in a house overlooking Haven's first school, where children still ran through the doors every morning under amber light. On his last evening, Pellin sat beside him by the window. The sky above Haven was clear. The defense platforms caught the sunset. A convoy was leaving orbit, bound for a new distress call beyond the Orion Spur. Veshin watched the engine trails rise. "Do you remember?" he asked, voice faint. "When we thought no one would come?" Pellin took his hand. "Yes." He smiled. "Look how wrong we were." The convoy vanished into the stars. Veshin closed his eyes with the sound of children laughing beyond the window and engines lighting in the sky. Years later, at the entrance to the Assembly of Answering Worlds, there stood a monument made from 3 things: a fragment of Dinari glass from the destroyed conservatory, a steel beam from the first Haven school, and a folded paper bird preserved under transparent crystal. The inscription beneath it was carved in every known language and left blank in spaces for languages not yet heard. "Tell the truth. Hold position. Someone will come." And across the galaxy, they did. Thank you sincerely for reading this story to its final hopeful ending and for sharing this journey of loss, courage, rescue, shelter, and unity among the stars. Please subscribe to support the channel and click https://www.youtube.com/@HFY_storytelling. https://www